So another Dutch treat I enjoyed growing up very much is Oliebollen, which is a Dutch donut. So we'll start off with the ingredients and go from there. 3 cups of flour, 2 cups of milk, 1 cup of buttermilk. If you don't have buttermilk, you can just use 3 cups of milk, 1.5 tablespoons of yeast, 1 teaspoon of sugar, half a teaspoon of salt, and 1 cup of raisins. And there always seems to be a debate on whether raisins should be added or not. So some people like it with and some without. So that is optional. But yeah, generally 1 cup. You can add a little bit more. Some like to load them up with raisins. So you could do 1.5 cups. Now the dry ingredients are added first, except for the salt. So the salt we're going to add a little bit later. So add your 3 cups of flour, your sugar, and your yeast. Now this is a fair amount of yeast, but you're only letting it rise for 1 hour, so it does do a quick rise, and it is fairly yeasty. So give that a good mix. Just regular all-purpose flour is fine. So the literal translation to this is of Oliebollen is oil balls. So they're generally round in shape, but you'll see they can take on all kinds of shapes. The next step is to heat up your milk and buttermilk, or just your milk if you don't have buttermilk, for about a minute to a minute 20. So I found a minute 20 in this case. It depends on your microwave, of course. On high gives you a warm milk, but not hot. You don't want it too hot. You don't want to kill any yeast. So after a minute and 20, I'm going to just check the temperature to make sure it's not too hot. And I stir them up just because, yeah, the microwave doesn't always heat evenly. So I stir them up. And you can see it's under 40 degrees, which is fine. So anywhere, 35 to 40 degrees is warm milk, and that's fine. That kind of kickstarts your yeast, having a little bit warmer. So we're going to add our buttermilk and our regular milk to the dry mixture. And I use a Danish dough whisk. It does a good job of incorporating wet and dry ingredients. You could also use a wooden spoon or a plastic spoon. So you're basically making a batter and not a dough, so that's why there's a fair amount of liquid. So just keep working it back and forth and getting all the lumps out, making sure it's nice and smooth. Some people will add apple slices along with raisins, or just apple slices. So it's really up to you, but if you're making this for the first time, you can either make it without any ingredients, any extra like raisins or apples, just to make sure you get the technique down, or just use just raisins. Okay, so we're almost there. Now I'm going to add my 1 cup of raisins, so pretty much half, and then give it a mix. So you're trying to kind of get all evenly distributed with the raisins, and you'll find after the hour of rising they tend to sink to the bottom, so you kind of have to stir them again. So before you're deep frying these, you probably have to stir a few times just to keep everything roughly even. Hopefully you don't get complaints from some people that they don't have enough raisins. There's always one person that does that. But I've seen some recipes that like using 2 cups, so you can always add some more if you want. And we're just adding our salt, and we're going to give that another good stir. The reason we don't add the salt early on is to interfere with the yeast at the very beginning, so we just kind of add that at the end. Now if you don't have buttermilk, you could add a little bit of vinegar to the regular milk, and that kind of imitates that, but yeah, if you happen to have buttermilk, it's a nice addition. So you're going to place that lid on, but this one doesn't seal tightly, so it's important that you don't seal it completely, because there's a lot of obviously fermentation going on in that first hour with the rising, and you don't want your lid to pop off. So in the meantime, you're going to heat up your fryer to 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 170 degrees Celsius, give or take 5 degrees, but Generally about 175 to 180 is ideal. So there you can see after an hour it's risen quite a bit. There's lots of bubbles, and we're just gonna give that a gentle stir, kind of folding it over, getting rid of most of the air but kind of leaving a little bit because you do want a nice fluffy donut. So just kind of punch that down a little bit, get those raisins kind of mixed together. Now you see I don't have a basket in my fryer. I took it out because these can be fairly big, and you want to make sure they're completely submerged in the oil. So this is not a large fryer. I am using an ice cream scoop. I find it easy to use, and it keeps them consistent. But a lot of people will use 2 spoons, so 2 large spoons together, and just kind of scrape one spoon with the other. But this works well for me. You want to shake off kind of the extra dough that's hanging down, but sometimes you will have a little piece that hangs down. It ends up being a little arm, kind of a little thing that sticks out of the donut. So you'll see that a few will have that. And that's what they normally look like anyway. Now I don't do more than 3 in my fryer. You don't want to crowd them because they sometimes turn on their own and move around. And also you don't want your temperature of your oil to drop too fast either if you add too many. So just do three at a time if you have this size fryer. And just move them around a bit. Oftentimes they will flip on their own because as they cook on one side, it has a weight imbalance and they'll just flip to the heavier side. But sometimes you need to help them along. And I do have a strainer or colander with some paper towel just to the right. You'll see in a minute. And that's where you place the ones that are finished. So you're looking for a medium dark brown color. You don't want to pull them out too early or they'll be doughy inside. So they do have to cook. So roughly about 2 minutes, depending on the size of your Oliebollen. But I generally go by the color instead of time. So don't take my word for it on the time. You have to go by the color. So I would say medium dark brown, kind of roughly that color, or a little bit darker even. And for the type of oil, generally you want to use one that doesn't have a lot of flavor, so like a sunflower oil or vegetable oil. You could even use olive oil if you want, just not one with too much flavor because you don't want it to affect the taste of the donut. So give that a good shake, get most of the oil off. If your oil is too low in temperature, you might just want to wait. You don't want them to end up being too oily. So there you see kind of has a tentacle growing out of the side. That's just from not shaking off the dough enough, and you have a kind of a hanging piece that comes down. But they're always fun to see what kind of shapes you get. And oftentimes they'll just flip on their own. Now again, my fryer is small. If they had more room, they would generally flip on their own. But you help them along. So there you can see one flipping. And you'll want to have your exhaust fan and maybe a window slightly open just to kind of air out that area. Anytime you're deep frying it, you do have an odor for a while, but it's not too bad. I think most people like the smell of donuts anyway. So yeah, you try to take off the excess before you make your ball and put it in. And obviously be careful with oil. You don't want to be dropping it from any kind of height and splashing. So try to be gentle when you're letting go of that ball. And again, roughly 2 minutes, but go by color instead of time. So here you can see I'm just scraping down the remainder. I think I get 2 more out of this, but take a spatula and get it all into one area. This is traditionally served with icing sugar as well, just either sprinkled on top at the start for presentation, and then oftentimes people will take a little icing sugar on their plate and they'll just dunk, so they'll take a bite of the donut and kind of dunk it in the icing sugar. So that's the way to eat them, really. So I would recommend having some icing sugar on hand as well. And I would say this makes an average batch of, I think there were 16 or 17 medium-sized Oliebollen. So obviously if you want to keep going making bigger batches, then you could scale up your ingredients and just kind of either double each ingredient, or with the exception of probably the yeast, you wouldn't add too much more yeast. But yeah, this is kind of a good batch for a fair amount of people. Nice treat. And in goes the last one. And there you go. Of course, for some presentation, you could add a bit of icing sugar on top. Just use a wire strainer and just kind of give it a good shake. But like I said, people will add more sugar on their plate and kind of dunk it in. It's always nice when you bite halfway through the donut and then you kind of dip it once again in the sugar. That's at least the way I eat them. But yeah, nice holiday treat, nice to bring along. Also, let them cool down before you eat them. They tend to firm up a little bit once they cool down. Here I'm breaking one open when it's still fairly warm, so I could have waited a little bit. So a little bit gooey, but yeah, they do firm up. So let them cool down for probably 20 minutes or so, or 30 minutes. So there you go. I hope everyone gets a chance to try these. So thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more videos. Please subscribe, and bye for now.